Hello, welcome to Sarah's Prismatic Musings. We have a very special guest tonight. We have my nephew, Kyle Hansen, and he majored in political science and history in undergrad and then received his master's in climate and environmental policy from Vermont Law School. So we're going to discuss some politics. I don't usually discuss politics on my channel, but this last election just really, the propaganda just really pissed me off. And my nephew and I had a really good conversation. I went to the George Washington University in DC back in 2000, and this propaganda from the Democratic Party has been around since then. And it's kind of why I stopped discussing politics because I'm definitely an independent. I refuse to pick a party. And I just don't see the necessity of it. And I just did a bunch of research and found out that George Washington, our first president, was not affiliated with any parties. And the founding fathers did not want any partisanship in our country. So the founding fathers didn't want politics, like political parties, and especially a two-party system. Um, so, Kyle, tell me about your conspiracy theory about the Democrats, because this is really good. I like it.
Yeah, the idea that Democrats are controlled opposition or paid opposition, basically that they make way more money being the opposition party than they do when they're in office, so they would rather be opposition. That's kind of what happened in 2018 after Donald Trump won in 2016. They ran so hard against him that they made so much money, and in 2018, that midterm, they swept a bunch of House seats and they got into power and then didn't do anything. They didn't push through any legislation. They didn't push through, Medicare for all was one of the big ones that the online left especially wanted the Democrats to try to push for, at least to have a vote to see what would happen. But their argument was, oh, we can't do anything because the Senate is still held by the Republicans. Doesn't mean they don't have to do anything. And then 2020, they won the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and then didn't do anything. And then they blamed Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and the Senate parliamentarian. And they said, oh, we can't do anything because these two people, and then a person that's not even elected, can make all the rules. And, Build Back Better didn't get passed through, which could have probably prevented Trump from winning again. So, yeah, it's looking at trends of when Democrats are in power. Like good examples, like 2006 um, midterms after George Bush won the second time. The Democrats won the House, didn't really do anything. Obama won in 2008, had a trifecta, didn't do anything, and then lost massively in 2010 in the midterms. So it's just this trend that Democrats keep doing where they're not very effective at being opposition. And that's why, or it's a reason why I could never consider myself a Democrat, because it's just, they're so pathetic. They just can't do anything. It's, you can be anti-Republican without being like, I don't know, having a label, I guess.
Exactly.
Like,
But
yeah.
it's really cool. I mean, both grew up in Vermont. So our ideology is very progressive. The way that we think Vermont is really cool. And the fact that during this research, I found out that Vermont is only one of two states that allows inmates to still vote. It's only Vermont and Maine. How cool is that? Like, Vermont is so progressive. Vermont was the first state to abolish slavery. It was the first state to allow same-sex marriage. Um, Vermont is just so progressive all the time and is just very different. And can be an independent and vote in all what is the word?
You can vote on all the
In,
ballots
in all the
or all the
ballots,
parties. You can pick and choose depending on,
right.
which one you pick up. You can pick up Republican, Democrat, and it's a progressive party, which rarely fields candidates statewide, but when they do, you can also vote in the primaries for them.
Right. And in places like Arizona and New Mexico and a lot of other places, you have to pick a political party. And often they pretty much force you to pick Republican or Democrat. So all these people have in their minds that you have to be either a Democrat or Republican. And I refuse to pick. I refuse to pick. I'm not going to pick because I think that they're both evil. As I mentioned at the beginning, the United States wasn't supposed to have political parties. It was meant to literally be free. And, most of our issues as working class citizens, as, citizens of the United States comes down to lobbyists, and it comes down to corporations having more rights than individuals.
Yeah, and that's in the way I kind of put it to a friend the other day was that both parties are both pro corporate. They're both right wing liberal economics focused parties. Just the Democrats are more you know socially liberal, so they're in favor. They're more pro choice, pro LGBT rights, and then the Republicans are just it's just those two issues. It's
Right, but you
just
know what?
social issues.
As a woman, I am very tired of my rights and my being viewed as a human being being a political selling point. It should stop being
Yeah,
a selling point with the Democratic Party. Biden and Obama, they could have codified that women are seen as citizens and humans, full humans.
yeah,
It's been sitting on Biden's desk for the last 4 years. Why couldn't he get it done? Again, it's bullshit. There's no
yeah.
reason that it wasn't done. And I'm tired. I'm. Of it. I'm tired of
Well, it's
the, go ahead.
like when Roe was overturned, and the Democrats ran on that in 2022, and they were hoping to do that again this time to say, oh, Roe's been overturned. You got to vote us in. That there's candidates across the entire country. Look at their campaign platforms. Their only message was Roe being overturned. They had no economic policy. They had no foreign policy. They had no trade policy. They had nothing. It was just abortion rights. That was it. And then they wonder why they lost when that was their only message. Like, you have to have a well-rounded campaign that actually speaks to working class people beyond just one issue. Like, you can think about, okay, yeah, you can be pro-choice, but you also need to think about raising minimum wage, um, at least working towards, single payer health care, if not, public option if you don't want to go that far, or, trade policy, or the Israel Palestine, or just funding foreign wars in general. There's so many different issues that would have motivated voters because they kind of saw after 2022, okay, Democrats won a bunch of positions, but then the states ended up voting to protect abortion rights anyway. So the only states that didn't pass their own measures to protect abortion rights are the deep red states. So all the states that were swing states, abortion is already protected. So literally running on that as your only message doesn't won't win you anything because the voters will be like, well, it's legal in my state, so what does it matter if it is nationally or not? It's not enough to motivate the base. Um, so yeah, I definitely agree that like we need to think about and Democrats. I wish that we had a third party nationally that was actually progressive and populist and pushed an economic message, kind of like Bernie in 2016 in the primary. And that's the thing being in Vermont. Like, we have a third party here
You do.
that's at a
Right.
state level, which it fluctuates. It's not always the most successful, but
It's
it still
actually
exists.
it's the Vermont Progressive Party, and it's actually considered the third most popular um, party in the United States because of the
Hmm.
number of politicians who hold office. So it actually beats out the Libertarians and the Green Party, which I can support both of those parties. I would support both of those parties over the Republicans or the Democrats any day. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the Vermont Progressive Party even outnumbers the Libertarians. It even outnumbers the Green Party. in terms of actual officials voted in.
Yeah, it's quite impressive to think that third parties can work even in a first past the post system. Though there are other, we will need like ranked choice voting, like we talked about, or other ways of making elections more fair for third parties, where people can vote for more, I wouldn't say fringe candidates, but less mainstream candidates and not worry about quote unquote wasting your vote, which I
Yeah,
think is a
that's
horrible argument.
I hate that. I was told in 2000 when I voted for Ralph Nader on the Green Party ticket that I threw away my vote. And it's like, no, if everybody voted the way that they actually felt and everyone voted either, Ralph Nader or, whoever was running on the Libertarian ticket back then, whatever. I think we could get a third party candidate in for president. I think people are afraid because of that rhetoric of, well, you're throwing away your vote. So you had brought this to my attention, the rank voting, which is really cool. So far, there's only 3 states that do it. Maine, which is where you were just telling me about. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Maine, Alaska, and then Hawaii only does it at the state level. And then there's a few other states, like New Mexico has ranked voting, but it's only for local, like Las Cruces and Santa Fe. And that's it for local elections. But statewide, they don't have it. And then there's 11 states that prohibit ranked choice voting, which that makes no sense. That seems very unconstitutional to limit ranked choice voting.
Yeah,
And again, they're very red states, deep red states that
yeah,
prohibit it. So tell me a little bit about ranked choice voting because a lot of people don't know about this.
yeah. So ranked choice voting is a really cool idea because you can have, let's say, you have 5 candidates on the ballot, and if you really want to vote for, the Greens on the top, you could do okay. Greens at number one spot. Number two, there might be, an independent or libertarian or whatever you want to do for number two. Number three could be Democrat. Number four could be whatever else. And then the bottom, you don't have to vote for all 5, but if you wanted to rank all of them, let's just say you rank them like that. When all the votes are counted, the top vote getter, you just say, okay, who got the most votes? The last place candidate gets crossed out. Those voters, their second choice gets their vote. So if they didn't vote for anyone else, those votes would get, then you would waste your vote. But if you vote for your second choice, let's say you voted Green 1, Democrats 2, if the Green Party got last place, your votes would go to the Democrat. Or in many cases, you would go to another third party or an independent or whoever. And it could theoretically add up to the point where you would help the lesser of two evils over the line in the end, or it could be your preferred candidate could win let's say you might not win the first round, but if you're third, but the two below you all go to you, you could outperform the top two. So that way you can have more candidates on the ballot without the risk of a candidate winning with only 35% of the vote, which is a possibility if there's 3 candidates or more, which Canada deals with that a lot in their parliamentary elections where you have 3 major parties and like it's looking like the conservatives are going to win, but they might win, with only 45% of the vote, but they'll have a super majority because they have 3 parties splitting the vote. So ranked choice voting really helps when it comes to thinking, I can still vote for my preferred candidate, but the argument of I'm wasting my vote. Well, I won't waste my vote because if you're right that the third party is going to lose, my second choice will go towards the quote unquote like reasonable party, I guess, or the mainstream party. In Maine, this actually worked out really well in 2018 when it was first implemented. The second district, which is a district that Trump wins every time, it's trending conservative, but there was a Republican incumbent who was unseated by a Democrat. And because of ranked choice voting, that's how it was able to happen because Jared Golden was down want to say like 3 or 4 points, but the independent had, I think, 6% of the vote, and then it all went to the Democrat and then pushed him over the top. And then the Republicans got very mad about that, which is, I think, why the Republican states banned it, because they saw what happened in Maine, where the Republicans can't win by pluralities anymore. And that, you have that second choice that helps the Democrats. And in Alaska, the same thing happened, where there were two Republicans that made it to the final runoff and one Democrat, and that was Mary Peltola, who sadly lost in 24, but she won in 20. What was it? Around 2020, it was or 2022 special election after their incumbent that they had since the 70s. He died in office, and then she won because of ranked choice voting, because she got second place. Palin got first place because Palin ran again for this House seat, and then Peltola got second, and then the Republican got third, Nick Begich, who won it this year. But all Begich's supporters hated Palin so much that they would rather vote for Peltola over Palin. So the more moderate Republican votes went to the Democrat and therefore blocked Palin from winning. If it was not ranked choice voting, Palin would have won that seat. So another reason to support ranked choice voting, because even if you have multiple candidates from the same party, you can help prevent universally unpopular people from winning with 35% of the vote. So I
Yeah, I
think
think
every state should do it.
ranked choice voting is like awesome. I think all states should have it. And then that way we can't have this propaganda of you're throwing your vote away. And people can actually start voting what they, you know, believe in their heart and what they feel instead of feeling like, the propaganda machines, like you said, candidates actually have to have a platform rather than just running on abortion rights or immigration or just as one little it's total bullshit because really it's like as we know nothing happens, nothing changes because if it doesn't help the lobbyists, if it doesn't help the corporations, nothing's going to change. So unless we really want change as American people, we really want like universal health care or, um, raise the minimum wage or, help subsidize farms so that, grocery prices don't keep raising, uh, raise, Social Security, benefits and all of these things that actually help us. It's not going to happen by keeping the two-party system going. Nothing's going to change. I think we do need to, do away with the electoral college. We need to do away with lobbyists. We need to like have term limits for, the House of Representatives and, the Senate. We need to totally change our whole system. And
Yep.
I'm still bitter about what happened to our guy Bernie. I will still always
Yeah.
support Bernie. The Democratic Party really did him dirty. And he is the great unifier. Republicans would have voted for him. Um, Obviously, Democrats, like he could have won and he would have made changes. And, if people are talking about, the propaganda that Trump isn't part of the elite is so laughable. I don't even, my brain melts thinking about like how that propaganda came about because he's an elite. He is in the top 1% and he is in on it. So to say he's not is just ridiculous. He couldn't have won two elections if he wasn't an elite. Bernie Sanders truly is not part of the 1%, and he was
Mm.
blocked from even being on the ballot. I mean, I wrote him in. I wasn't gonna, I don't care about throwing away my vote. I'm not gonna vote for somebody just because um that's what I'm supposed to do. I think that is such a cop out. And I don't know, I think that people just being spoon fed. I don't think people do their research and I don't think people really take their own, what am I trying to say?
Like they don't vote in their own interests.
Right, they don't vote, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, because like 2016, Bernie was really taken off, and that's when the Democrats got worried, and all the party insiders worked really hard to have influential and popular politicians in certain states back Hillary over Bernie, which then the impressionable median voter and, of course, Democratic uh, primary voters, which, of course, in the party, you're going to vote for whatever the party tells you to vote for. If you're a party member, in many of these states, you have to be registered as a
Right.
Democrat to vote
And
on the
that's what we're
ballot.
saying. You have
So,
to. It has to
yeah,
be, it can't even be a third party. You have to register for either Republican or Democrat if you want to have all
yeah,
your voting rights, which is such bullshit. Like,
yeah, you should
I hate
have
it.
to. Like,
No.
in Vermont, I'm not registered as any party, and I don't ever, I never will. I mean, it's
Yeah.
stupid to put all your eggs in one basket.
When I lived in Vermont, I wasn't registered to either party. But you know what? When I lived in other states, I still won't register to either party because I refuse. I am not, I don't tell me what to do. Like, and I think that this is what's cool about, growing up in Vermont is like Vermont promotes actual logical thinking and thinking outside of the
Yeah,
box. And you don't have to, and it's not just politics, it's for, other things as well. And Vermont just, doesn't follow what everybody else does. Like Vermont sets precedents, which it's such a small state, but it really does.
yeah, an interesting point. I mean, you were saying that Vermont was the first state that outlawed slavery, but unless I'm mistaken, Vermont was the first Western country that outlawed slavery because it was technically an independent country from 1777, 1791 when it became a state. And it was in its first constitution in 77 uh, that it outlawed slavery. And that was before the Haitian Revolution. So, unless I'm misremembering any of the other European nations that would have banned it before, I mean, possibly Switzerland, but Vermont would have been the first in the
Country.
Western Hemisphere, at least. Yeah, the first country in the Western Hemisphere that would have outlawed slavery.
You're probably right. I just said state because, a lot of people don't realize, that Vermont wasn't.
No,
And
yeah,
then,
Vermont was an independent
and a lot of
country longer than
people
Texas was.
a lot
Sorry.
of people don't know that there's still been movements, and I don't know about now because I'm not there, but through the 90s and early 2000s where Vermonters wanted to succeed from the Union. They wanted to succeed from the United States and create a country with Quebec and have
Yeah,
their own country of Vermont and Quebec. And I think that would have been cool. Is that still a
I
movement? Is
mean,
that still a thing?
no, I mean, there's some people
No.
who want it to just be Vermont. A very small group of people, and they're more on the right wing of things now.
Really? Back in the day, it
Yes.
was the left. They were progressive.
Yeah, now it's really just the anti-government types, like the right wing and super anti-government, want to defund everything, tear everything down.
The
Um,
like the libertarians or
I mean, it's hard to say what the line is in Vermont between libertarians and
progressives.
the militia groups, though. It's more like
Well,
that side. It's more
well,
like the anti-government. Yeah. What were you going to say? Sorry, I keep.
no, it's okay. Well, I mean, it is kind of hard to tell that line on the East Coast, unfortunately. Um, between the libertarians and in New Hampshire and the militia groups too. Um, the libertarian group is very popular in New Hampshire. They have a very large supporter base in New Hampshire.
Yeah. The Libertarian Party has gotten so weird in recent years because there has been an influx of Republican insiders joining the party to try to skew them further to the right. Because libertarians, I mean, should really just be a small government liberal kind of party, but there's
Hmm.
definitely factions that are more hard right, alt right. I wouldn't say fascist, but definitely more authoritarian than libertarian. Uh, and that's kind of a weird mix. So, like New Hampshire, their Libertarian Party is one of those, and I think Vermont is bordering on that too, which is why I'm like, oh, are you really libertarian, or
Right.
are you a far right person who claims you're libertarian just because you hate the government? Like
Right.
that's kind of the hard line, and that's like with me, I definitely agree with a lot of libertarian things, but the
You,
label is kind of tarnished up here.
you don't want to be associated with something that you're not. And
Yeah,
and that's why like I could never pick a party either because I'm like I don't agree with anything like 100%.
yeah. I mean, even the Vermont Progressive Party has things I disagree with them on. So I'm not gonna even. I'm just an independent through and through.
Yeah. Now, this is another thing that you had brought to my attention that I had never heard of before. And if you could talk about this, the blue MAGA.
Yes, this is a well, the hardcore Joe Biden supporters who are with him until the end. Basically, whenever the Democrats said was, you know, was gospel in a way, like, okay, they can do no wrong. We're voting blue no matter who. We're gonna push for Biden, even though he did so many things wrong. They would still support him. And then they would immediately, as soon as he stepped out and Harris was appointed, they immediately jumped ship. They didn't even care about Joe Biden anymore. But online, you would think that they were really hardcore Biden supporters. And the difference, though, and why a lot of people on the online left are saying, okay, blue MAGA, is because they don't really believe in anything. They just kind of like parrot what the party says. It's not the person, like with MAGA, it's whatever Trump says. The party doesn't matter. It's whatever Donald Trump says is true, and the party tends to follow what he says. Whereas with blue MAGA, it's okay, the Democratic Party says this, they want this, they support this. I'm going to support this. I'm going to say these talking points to my friends, my family, people I'm debating with online. That's the talking point, and that's what the party says. The person at the top doesn't matter. If it's Pelosi, if it's Biden, if it's Harris, if it's Schumer, it doesn't matter. So it's the same mentality, though. It's you're not thinking for yourself. You're not questioning you know, why did they change their position on this? It's just like, oh yeah, well, I guess that's what the party wants. So as a Democratic voter, I have to support it. Like, but the Trump voters, oh, Trump flip flopped on, you know, foreign policy or whatever. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'm supporting this now because he now supports it. It's a weird phenomenon that just further showcases that our politics is nothing more than a live action football game. That it's like, oh yeah, I'm rooting for this team. I don't care what the other team wants. I don't care if they're the same exact thing with a different color. Like it's my team and I'm gonna support them no matter what. It's a weird mentality that, when both parties are just corporate entities that aren't actually reflective of the voter base. Um, to just have this undying support and parroting of it, whatever you hear on the news.
Yeah, definitely. You created a your own political party in high school. You did a project and it's called the American PFL
Yeah,
Official. Do you want to
yeah,
talk a little bit about that?
sure. So PFL, it's the Progressive Farmer Labor Party. I was inspired by 1920s era populist and progressive movements in leading into the Great Depression. So between the Teddy Roosevelt presidency and Franklin Roosevelt presidency, there was a complete absence of any opposition at the national level to the Republicans. In the 20s with Harding and Coolidge and yeah, Hoover, they really wrecked the entire uh, national and global economy because of post-war or post-World War One policies. The only real opposition was, a collection of urban and Midwestern populists and progressives who were pushing for more economic equality, more economic freedoms, and they there was this movement called the farmer labor movement, which was hoping to unite the populist farmer and the progressive union worker. And being that, the only way to fight against the corporate elites is to have all the working classes unite. Farmers are workers and union members are workers, and everyone in between who's you know, not at the top is also working class. So a modern take on that ideology, I think, is what's necessary to really combat the two party system. You need to have an actual working class party that isn't all liberal or all conservative. You need to have some middle ground. You need to have some things on the left. You can't just have the Democratic Party with a little tweak. So that's where a new party is necessary, especially to work in these rural areas like
Mhm.
Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all these states that the Democrats are really struggling in now. They're populist. If you have a populist left message that unites more the rural farmers or the rural union workers, and but also you keep the cities, and that's the hard thing, is to have both.
And so, with your party, how do you think it would unite both?
I think it would work really well because, of course, I mean the urban vote really cares about. I mean, there's definitely like a public safety element, but there's also like protections, civil liberties protections, especially for minority voters, education. You want to fund your inner city schools. You want to make sure that you have, an ability to get a good education and to go to college. You can have health care that's covered by the state, by tax dollars. You can have public transportation that makes it so you don't have to have a car in the inner city. You don't have to worry about being on a, you know, falling apart subway if your city even has a subway. Like investing in infrastructure, investing in healthcare, investing in education, these things
Pretty much
would really help
everything
the city vote.
that we
Yeah.
all want now.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that people are finally waking up that this isn't our country. It's not about races or even genders, even though that's what the political parties want us, or political parties. It's a class warfare. We are in
Yeah.
a class warfare, and it's literally the 1% and the corporations versus, like you said, everybody else who's not part of the 1% or owns a corporation. We are the working class.
Yeah.
And it literally is us versus them. And unfortunately, we do outnumber them. But the way that these policies are set up with the Electoral College and, the propaganda and them owning the media, they really skew to have people vote against their best interest.
Yeah. And it would be
So,
really nice if there was a party that you didn't have to vote against your self-interest. And that's
right.
was the idea behind that, is that, you could have all these economic policies that are populist and would help lower income people in the working class,
Because I think, like you
regardless of where you live.
we would all love to have a better infrastructure and better education for everybody and
Yeah.
all have equal rights. And like these aren't things for debate. And raising the minimum wage, like there's no debate. The only debate comes from the top 1% who just doesn't want to give up power and doesn't want to give up their money. They have more than enough money that, it really wouldn't even hurt them to
Yeah.
pay workers 20 or even $25 an hour. I mean, I've worked for state government for over a decade and they don't even pay, really anything. I was working for a county making $17 an hour in a big city where, that doesn't even do anything. That's like minimum.
Yeah.
So, and there was no policies, there was nothing to help with, paying off your student loans or anything like that. There was no like helping you get further education. Like, where is the support for the working class?
Yeah. There's also, I mean, you take it a step further and think about, housing policy. Like,
Mhm.
there's rent controls and there's stuff like that you can go down, but there's also like, every person should be guaranteed a place to live. I mean,
Right.
be it an apartment, be it a room in a shared living space, be it a house. I mean, you can, there's a lot. If you house the homeless and you feed the hungry and you
You
give
create
work to the
safety.
unemployed,
You
yeah,
create safety within your society and it
yeah,
uplifts everybody. I'm reading this really great book that talks about what we're dealing with right now. In the 1500s, the laws that were going on in England and other Northern European countries, mainly Northern European countries, with the enclosures, which basically is privatization of land that used to be communal spaces. And so with the privatization, then it created homelessness, it created beggars. And what that did was before everybody took care of everybody and everybody shared and everybody farmed the same land, what privatization did was close off that and create instability. And then what happened was um, the burning times, creating an us versus them. And so then you had to have the scapegoat. And so who became the scapegoats? Well, the Jewish people and women, and they were considered witches and then burned.
yeah. And the Jews were also persecuted because they had wealth, because they
Right,
engaged, like, they had banking practices and whatnot that a lot of Christians didn't engage in. So again, they had more money relatively than other people, so they were seen as, oh, let's go steal from them.
right.
Um, yeah, it's when people get desperate, it's scary when there's people in charge who have the wrong message and people flock to the wrong message as a solution, which
I think I mean, I'm very scared for the next 4 years. It's
yeah,
very scary. And, I try not to get caught up in that. Um, but it's like, when are people gonna finally like wake up?
yeah. I mean, with all the media that's going against left wing ideas. I mean, 2016 Bernie would have been our best chance
Yes,
if he won the primary. Because I
exactly.
mean, I voted for him in the primary in 2020, but that didn't do anything. And the party really coalesced around Biden just to make sure he lost. And that's, there were definitely people were saying in 2020 that if Bernie won the primary, like Democratic insiders, that they would have voted for Trump over Bernie because they would rather, like,